Jane Caro, welcome to Booktopia.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I think of you as a very contemporary woman who thinks about very contemporary issues, and I'm really intrigued that you would choose to write about the young Queen Elizabeth I. What was the appeal?
She's been a hero of mine since I can remember, and I think when I was growing up, particularly in the 60s and 70s, there was a dearth of female heroes, of women that you could look at as exercising power in particular on their own and being seen to have done it well. If you search your knowledge of history, there aren't a lot. And Elizabeth I was kind of the standout because she determinedly refused to get married, which was something that immediately kind of piqued my interest, because so many of the women who were famous in history got there through husbands or whatever else. Now, obviously, she was well fathered in terms of inheriting a throne, but nevertheless, and the fact that she was such an outsider, so not considered to be ever likely to get to the throne, and also that once she got there, it was assumed that she was holding it kind of temporarily until she married, and then her husband would rule and she'd get on with the business of producing princes. And her refusal to do that, her rebellion, while staying in convention. So she was very conventional in terms of the fact that she was an absolute monarch. She took all those privileges very seriously. She was very religious. There was much about Elizabeth that was absolutely conventional to her time. But there was a bedrock rebellion about knowing that if she was going to have the power, she had to hold it for herself. And I loved that. And she's fascinated me ever since.
Okay, but I mean, I'm also interested in the fact that, you didn't have the field to yourself. This is a very, very crowded bit of territory. We've got Philippa Gregory, for starters, Jean Plaidy, Hilary Mantel. I mean, everybody's in this space.
I know.
Everybody's interested in Elizabeth. So why did you jump in there, boots and all?
Well, I've dreamed of my life to have a novel published. And after a number of attempts, I started to realise that I was not your great literary writer. That was not me. I wasn't that interested in being a great literary writer. I'm a teller of stories. I like stories. I like telling a good tale. And I was in a writing group, and one of the members of the writing group was a now published author, but then unpublished, Lisa Storrs. And she was writing a book about the Romans and the Etruscans. And she got some interest in that from an agent. And I thought, oh, lucky you, gee, I'd love
Writer
somebody.
envy.
Writer envy. And then I thought about it. I thought, come on, Jane, put your marketing hat on. You've worked in advertising and marketing all your life. You want to write a novel, you want to get it published. You've got to write a genre novel. That's what you're going to have to do. So what genre could you bear to write? And I thought detective. I thought, I'm not clever enough. I'm not going to be able to come up with a plot that's clever. I thought science fiction. Nah. Then I thought romantic. No, I'd rather kill myself than do romantic literature. I'm really not interested. And then I thought historical. I thought, yes, I love history. I could do historical. And then I thought, yes, but it's going to take years of research. I'm going to have to spend an awful lot of time with this person, whoever it is, or this era. And I thought, Elizabeth I, that's who I want to write about. And I didn't even look at what anyone else was doing. It just grabbed me. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to write in her voice. And I know, could I be more arrogant if I tried? I accept that. But at this time, I was just trying. And I wrote a couple of chapters, took them to that writing group, read them out, and they were all completely spellbound. And they said, it's the best thing you've ever done. You've got to keep going. We want to hear more. And so that was encouragement. So
and was there a sense also then, Jane, I mean, maybe you did a very smart thing there in that you didn't have to worry about plot because you knew what happened to her. You could go into the psychology, get inside her head. So get inside her head when she's just about to be crowned in Volume 1, and then get inside her head when she's deliberating about the execution of Mary Queen of Scots in the new book in Volume 2. So, but you don't have to worry about where she's got to get to.
No, exactly right. And that, I've realised too, is something I love to do. What drives me, I think, through everything I do, is a curiosity about what makes a person tick. What's going on inside? What are the motivations? What are the drivers? What are the conflicting and contradictory feelings that get them into a certain situation, and then how do they respond to that. And that's why detective fiction wasn't of interest to me. This is plot driven. I really, really wanted to get into the psychology, the emotions, and the real bedrock motivations of someone who lived a really interesting life.
And did you think very consciously that you wanted to write for a young adult market, that you wanted in a way to present the young Elizabeth as a kind of role model for younger women?
No, I didn't. I set out to write the book I wanted to write. I didn't think about who was going to read it.
Which is odd, given your marketing background.
Exactly, I know. But in a way, it's also a holiday from my marketing background. Okay. When you spend your whole life thinking, how is this going to be received? People say to me, why do you do this? And I said, because I get such a kick out of it. It's totally different. So in a way, it's a change as good as a holiday kind of thing. So I didn't think about who was going to read it. I thought about why would she do this? Why would she say this? How would you feel if this happened to you? How would you feel about that when you look back on it? I described it in the intro as being like, I imagine, an actor thinks about Elizabeth when they take on the role. And that was so much fun. It was so interesting. And so, no, I didn't think about a young adult audience. And in fact, when I first tried to get it published, I got very positive responses. Oh, very enjoyable, great read, really enjoyed it. Can't see how to make it work in the Australian market. And I was getting quite despondent and thinking, oh, well, I gave it a go, but no one's interested. And then a friend of mine said, could it be young adult fiction? And I suddenly went, you know what? It definitely could be. She said, well, send it to my publisher, Christina Schultz at UQP, and I did, and within 2 weeks I had a contract, which was just fantastic. And then I kind of realised that, yes, in retrospect, I realised she is a hero for young women. She is somebody that young women can read about and think, yes, blokes, don't ever tell us we can't do it. She did it. She did it on her own against the most formidable odds, and that's what makes her so important to women, I think.
Yes, but Jane, in the latest book, in Just a Queen, she's not only thinking about the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, and she's clearly very torn, and she's afraid. I mean, she has power, but she's also very afraid of losing it. But she's also considering various suitors. And I guess the place where modern young women are going to find it very difficult to identify with Elizabeth is with this idea of the Virgin Queen. That's not going to get a lot of traction in today's world, is it? So just tell me about your thinking around that.
Well, actually, I'm not sure you're right, because if you think about the Vampire Diaries and all of that, it's all about teetering on the brink of having sex but not actually having it.
Okay.
So there's an awful lot of this tease, and there's a bit of tease, not heaps of tease, but a bit of tease in this, the second book between her and Lester, Robin Dudley.
Yes.
And so it is in that particular area. Of course, it gives me a huge, and this is my marketing hat speaking, it gives me a huge advantage with religious schools. There's no sex in these books. It's safe territory. And I actually really like the fact that this gives me an opportunity to point out just how dangerous sex was for women until relatively recently. The first question I get asked at every Writers' Festival by young audience is, well, she wasn't really a virgin, was she? The modern view is no one could willingly go through life being a virgin. I always say, of course she was a virgin. Of course she was, and here are the reasons why. First is far too dangerous not to be. There was no contraception that worked. What if she got pregnant? That would be the ruin of her, no question. Second reason, women died in childbirth like flies. There's a reason there's so many stepmothers in fairy tales. Mothers died agonisingly, horribly. Sex, you took your life in your hands. She could see this and went, I don't think I want to, and I've got a choice to say no. No. Sensible, rational decision. Third reason, her father cut her mother's head off. It might put you off compelling. The whole idea.
Yeah.
She had the choice. She chose against it. That's a very powerful choice. And I think it's worth young women recognising that we have the freedom, the liberty and the technology, the medical technology in particular, which enables us to make very different choices. But for women in the past, the absolutely overwhelming nature of what could happen to you and how vulnerable it made you dominated women's lives. She was the hero she was because she was able not to let it dominate her life.
She refused the kind of tyranny of biology.
That's exactly right.
So what have you taken by way of liberties in terms of speculating about her state of mind? I mean, obviously you can't depart from the fact she did behead the Queen of Scots. She did have a thing for the Earl of Leicester, but he went and married somebody else. Where have you really been bold in speculating about what was going on in her head?
I think in all of the emotional turmoil I have interpreted, and probably in a more modern way than may have been true at the time, though
Did you read letters and stuff that gave you clues?
Yes, but mostly I imagined how would a human being feel in that particular situation. And I think that has integrity, because I don't know that our emotional lives, I mean, if you look at Shakespeare, for example, the emotions that are expressed there are utterly identifiable for modern people. So I suspect that there's a strong argument to say that a lot of the emotions I imagine someone would feel in that position, they would have felt. Obviously, some of the ways I've written it in terms of making it accessible to a modern audience, I've taken liberties there. If there were rumours or legends about certain things and they worked for my purposes, I would take them. But I did not make anything up. I made up one scene in Just a Girl, which is about why she was banished from her father's court for 6 months. And that, I think I have a good argument to say, is possibly what happened, but and I always admit I made that scene completely up. But otherwise I stick pretty solidly to what we know actually occurred. And I didn't feel a need to make much up because it's so
rich.
Oh, and I love the history, and I don't want to. In fact, one of the things that drives me crazy when I read books about her or about that period is when they do muck about with the history. That drives me nuts. Don't do that. You don't need to.
I do think it's another irony. I mean, thinking of you as a very contemporary woman who really loves to grapple with contemporary issues about feminism, I also think of you as a Republican, and here you are writing a book about a monarch. What's next?
Well, I've got a third volume in my head if this one sells well.
So she'll be what age when you start volume 3?
Volume 3, she'll be 69, and she'll be sitting on... this is true, she sat for 6 days on cushions and refused to go to bed, sucking on a finger before she died. And
what was that about?
Nobody knows. She was completely silent. And then they finally persuaded her to go to bed, and she died. But my conceit is that she's sitting there going back over her life, and she's thinking to herself, did I do what I meant to do? Was I a success? Was I a failure? How will history judge me? What will my legacy be? And I think all her contemporaries are dead. She has outlived all her contemporaries. And there's a man waiting to take the throne in Scotland. And I know what the attitude would have been. Would be what it is now, Caroline. It would have been, I wish that old battered die so that we can get the bloke and put things back to right, silly old woman. And I think she'll know that. And I think she'll be going back over her whole life and looking at what she thinks she did well and what she thinks she did badly and how. And I'm also an atheist, but she is going to be thinking, how will I make account of myself to God?
If I go to heaven.
If I go to heaven. Well, I'll have to make account to God, even if he sends me to the terrible place, but there will be a reckoning. And what will I have to make penance for, and what will I be rewarded for doing? So that's basically the next thing that I would love to do. What I'm in the middle of doing right now, though, is something completely different, which is a memoir, which Pam McMillan commissioned me to do, which is really quite challenging. It's much easier writing about Elizabeth, I have to say, than writing about myself.
Are you finding it difficult to tell the truth?
No, not difficult to tell the truth. Again, I'm finding that I'm much less interested in the events than I am interested in what was going on inside me at various times. So it's much more about that. And that's turned out to be an easy way of letting a whole lot of people off the hook in terms of things I could have said about them and haven't, because it's really about my emotional journey rather than... this person did that or said this or whatever, all those kinds of things. And I don't mix with particularly famous people, so I'm not sure that it'd be all that interesting in terms of a movie star biography might be, for example.
I don't believe that for a second, but I look forward to both of your new projects very much. Thank you very much, Jane. Caro.
Pleasure.